So, I mean, basically, Voice of OC is designed here to be your newsroom. I worked my whole life in newspapering. As Deborah mentioned, I kind of rose the ranks, in investigative, mostly because as a city reporter, I was always asking uncomfortable questions. When I was at Congressional Quarterly in DC, I asked a lot of questions. That's what I learned how to do a lot on procedures and what worked, what didn't work, even though in an environment like Congress where it's constantly changing. But that's frankly where I learned the model of saying, wow, imagine if you had this back home. I grew up in the south side of Whittier. I mean, kind of a Latino working class community. But always as a little kid, I kept wondering about how come our neighborhoods look different, or why is my sidewalk different than the one up on the upside of town? How come my satellite library looks a different way? And frankly, as a kid and eventually as an investigative reporter, you start learning. You're like, I'm not the only one that has this curiosity, right? I mean, any normal person is asking, what's happening with traffic? What's happening with everything that you can think about when it comes to protecting your quality of life, right? Whether it's plastic straws, whether it's traffic, housing, development, super complex topics. I remember in Congress, we would spend, I can tell you, we'd spend entire days that were on hearings and markups, and legislation would go around and around. The idea being is that it gets better and better as it goes around. Well, lo and behold, my dream comes true, and I get to come back to Southern California where I grew up and apply all those skills to the local level. And from day one, I landed I left DC and went to go work in the Virgin Islands Daily News and covered the governor and Senate there. When I came back to Southern California, I started working in San Bernardino, moved down to San Diego and up Orange County. I started finding that all the counties, whether it's Republican or Democrat, you have the same kind of issues. You all fund a police state pretty much, where a huge percentage of your money goes towards one usage, and it is not questioned ever. I don't think I've ever heard a city council ask, what did we spend on overtime last month? Who did we jail and why, right? So that you could help as policymakers fine tune a little bit more, help the sheriff. This idea of saying, like, maybe you're not the best agency for me, homeless outreach, right? So much of our local government has basically been turned over to the police department. And I think, frankly, it's been a thing between Republicans and Democrats that both of them just handed over the reins of government, and kind of because of campaign purposes, I think is the only reasonable reason, because as you said earlier, the idea of incarcerating more people and the impact that that causes in a community, even if you want to be hard on criminals. I think the key question in those instances, and this is what Voice of OC was founded on, what kind of criminals are you going after, right? Are you going after real criminals? We just did a story earlier this month that said basically the number one prosecuted crime in Orange County is drug paraphernalia, which, again, as an investigative reporter, makes me wonder whether we are chasing the same people around and around. We arrest them, we put them in the system, we put them through a probation system, we spend billions of dollars doing this. And at the end of the day, it doesn't go anywhere. Nobody's asking questions of, like, gang members, do we have as many as we had 10 years ago? If not, why? And where are they? Has that moved? We were able to break Al Qaeda, but the same gangs exist in Orange County and have for years. So all of those kind of like detailed questions, I think, is what we saw as nonprofit news can address in a way that is not here to entertain you. It's here to go after, the bells and whistles, the nuts and bolts of government. Like, look, earlier on, I heard the mayor, with all due respect, I think it was when you were saying that maybe there's a majority of the city council here, right? My alarm bells, not alarm bells, but at least my thought process goes off and goes, wait a minute, is that a Brown Act violation? Because has that been noticed as a public meeting if a majority of people are going to be here? Well, there's not a decision that's going to be made, but did everybody in the town get noticed that would happen? Those are the kind of things that a nonprofit newsroom needs to be asking of everybody who's in charge. I tell my reporters this all the time: transparency equals accountability. You expect what you can inspect. So in reality, in general, I just say, as a nonprofit news site, our aim is this, our goal is this, to be able to cover all of the cities of Orange County. You'd be stunned at what's happening at your local cities, and many of the questions that there's just not a good venue to figure out. Connected bike lanes, right? With COVID, one thing we've seen is that our infrastructure needs a complete revamping, and now has an opportunity, really, despite the horrible deaths that have taken place over this last year. It's been so stressful on everybody. But we have opportunities as well. That's local government. A nonprofit news site should be able to follow that debate along in a respectful way, holding the powerful accountable, again, in a respectful way. I think that gives us better quality of life. We're also working with students. You know, I teach at Chapman University. We bring a lot of them in, and they're actually helping us cover a lot of cities. Our op-ed pages are very, very vibrant, and we invite, you know, community opinion from all over the place. And it's caused, you know, huge changes. You know, you've got a better animal shelter system already because of one activist named Rose Tingle, who wrote repeatedly, story after story after story, raising the issue of animal welfare, eventually to the point where the county supervisors took action on that, and you now have a $35 million animal shelter system because of an op-ed writer. And so again, I go back to the concept that the country is founded on pamphleteers, right? The idea that the truth makes better policy. I even think for officials, it's important to surround them with a community of questioning because it helps them be better, helps them think through things. There's not a board, you know, of directors in America that doesn't ask itself hard questions, or any business at the upper levels that doesn't have strong conversations about what is the best way to do, because in local government, it isn't always clear, right? It's a menu of choices and implications from those choices. So again, to me, a nonprofit newsroom works on that day and night. I mean, since COVID hit, our reporters, and you don't even have to ask them to do this, they've all worked day and night to keep the community informed. Sadly, you know, the county has not performed very well. I mean, there have been deficiencies at almost every level of government over this last year that I think in a lot of ways, you know, made us really realize, you know, again, how much we have to pay attention and we have to keep questioning. Look what happened with the testing and now the vaccines. The same communities keep getting left behind. The same communities that are not being dealt with equitably in the criminal justice system are left behind every single time. And that's something that, again, when I served on the board of directors for investigative reporters and editors, I kept asking my colleagues, we have to ask ourselves some questions. We end up with the same results again and again and again, decade after decade. There's got to be something that gets out in front of this and offers real-time reporting to people before engines start blowing up. And I'll just leave you with this. We get such great feedback on the Noise of OC shirts or merchandising that we put out there. And this kind of questioning, it does tend to irritate people. We try to do it as respectfully as we can. But I think, again, it's really important to keep in mind that your quality of life is a complicated thing to maintain. It's day in and day out. That's one thing we realize as reporters. It's not just about doing big investigations. It's about getting you the information out in front. And I think I'll even close with this. News, it's in and of itself an organizing action, an action to organize the most intelligent people in society and to give them the tools that they need to then go craft policy without getting involved in outcomes. And so anyway, I'm happy to take questions. We're all funded by readers. We did have an initial grant for the labor union. We did also get journalistic foundations that helped us out early on. We've done a very good job, I think, of being good stewards of your donors' money. At the same time of expanding always to bring in new foundations, major donors. We work really tirelessly day and night. We don't have a lot of layers of management, so we're able to really focus. So whether it was COVID, protests, you know, homelessness. I mean, we've even got an encampment now in our office in Santa Ana. It's constant, but I can tell you, it's the honor of my life to lead this team and to, you know, train, you know, good, solid reporters, many of which have moved on into the mainstream media and become investigative reporters. And they're faces that you typically wouldn't see because we hire very diverse at Voice. We're very cognizant of our responsibility as a community institution to do that. And so again, like I said, I'm really, really proud of the work that the reporters and the donors have been able to bring you all. And happy to take your questions or participate in the other discussion, which is, again, super interesting and critical.
Wonderful. Norberto, thank you so much. That was so informative and so much. And